Greetings, my fellow ghouls, goblins, and ghosts. I bid you welcome to my catacombs of creepiness. Those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Purgatory, the Queen of Samhain, and here in my catacombs of creepiness, my little house of horrors, and my cemetery of screams, we discuss all things horror and the macabre, big or small. So if you're just as big of a horror nerd as I am, then be sure to smash that like button down below and subscribe to my channel for more horror and spooky content. Also, be sure to give me a follow on all platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at PurgatoriHorror. Alright, now time to get into today's spooky little topic. Because I am working on a pretty big project for this channel, which is Killer Kids of Horror, and there are, believe it or not, more evil children horror films than I thought there were. And obviously, I won't be able to do all of them, but there are going to be a good bit, so this week I decided to do something a little bit different, something kind of random. I asked you guys to vote on my Twitter poll, and the majority of you guys voted for best horror films to watch in the dark. So that's the topic of today. Best horror films watched in the dark. So without further ado, here are my top picks for horror films best watched in a dark room. I am going to be counting these down, and I'll give a little explanation as to why I think these films are best to watch in the dark. Starting with number 10, Gungan Haunted Asylum. Those of you who don't know what it is, Gungan Haunted Asylum is a 2018 South Korean found footage horror film about a film crew from a horror web series who likes to travel around and explore different haunted places. They decide to do a live broadcast of themselves exploring the most haunted location that they could find, which happened to be Gungan Psychiatric Ward. The film is actually based on a real-life psychiatric hospital of the same name, which I may have to do some research on in the near future because it was such a good film and it sounds kind of interesting. But why do I think this film should be watched in a dark room? Well, it's the perfect film to watch in a dark room for its tone, subtle jump scares, and overall creepy tones and imagery. All of these things make for a perfect horror film to watch in the dark. It will honestly creep you out if you watch this one in the dark. Trust me. Coming in at number 9, Ringu, or its American remake, The Ring. Both films follow a very similar plot with only a few differences, but the film, obviously both films, are about a cursed videotape that will kill you just 7 days after watching it. If you've seen either of these films, then you would probably understand why I feel this way. It's horrifying, and the ghostly, creepy, nightmarish imagery makes both of these films so damn creepy to watch in a dark room. In fact, I think watching either of these in a dark room really adds to the aesthetic, so I highly recommend doing that. Number 8. Both Horror in the High Desert films, Horror in the High Desert and Horror in the High Desert 2, Minerva. These are both fairly newer horror films in the mockumentary found footage horror subgenre. The first one being about a missing survivalist named Gary Hinge, who disappears after a shocking discovery deep in the high desert of Nevada. Part 2 kind of expands on that story a little bit with a murder and the disappearance of someone else in the same area. The first Horror in the High Desert film is good to watch in the dark, really mainly because of the end of the film. If you know, you know. Without spoiling the ending, I'm just going to say the end is very haunting, especially watched in the dark. Actually, it made me jump. Horror in the High Desert 2, Minerva has some really haunting, like VHS-esque scenes that are very creepy and nightmare fuelish. The whole vibe of the film actually makes for a good creepy flick to watch in a dark room, especially if paired with the first one. Number 7, The Blair Witch Project 1999 and The Blair Witch 2016. Both of these films follow the found footage horror subgenre format, and the reason I say that they are both great horror films to watch in the dark is because of their haunting, creepy aesthetic. No more, no less. Some people love these films, some people hate them, but what made them both fun for me was watching them in the dark. Actually, I think they're definitely more effective if you watch them in the dark, honestly. Number 6, The Conjuring 2013. If you're a horror fan, chances are you've seen these films, but even if you haven't, it doesn't necessarily make you any less of a horror fan. I just wanted to clarify that. You at least know of these films, if anything. Even if you're not a huge horror fan and you're just a fan of the paranormal, seeing as how they were based on real cases worked on by Ed and Lorraine Warren. This film, with its very creepy, nightmare-fueled imagery, dark tones, spooky aesthetic, and jump scares, make this a perfect horror film to watch in a dark room. Huddled in a dark room, tightly in a blanket, with a big bucket of popcorn. Heaven. Like I said, I've watched this one in the dark. I've watched it multiple times in the dark, so I can definitely back this statement. Number 5, we have The Cabinet of a Dr. Caligari, 1920. This is a silent horror film with very artsy visuals that are very twisted, distorted, and dark. This one is mostly fun to watch in the dark because of the visuals, but also for its sheer creepiness. Mainly for the aesthetic, and that's why I love watching this one in the dark. Number 4, City of the Dead, aka Horror Hotel, 1960. This is one of my favorite classic horror films of all time, mainly because it stars the phenomenal Christopher Lee. I love this movie, and I think it's fantastic to watch in the dark because of its atmosphere. Such a great film with this very spooky, foggy, creepy aesthetic hanging over it, with scenes that just look aesthetically beautiful watching it in a dark room. It really gives you a spooky season / haunted vibes type of feeling, which is something, you know, the Halloween Queen over here can definitely get behind. Number 3, The Wolfman, 1941. As I said before while talking about City of the Dead, I love a good horror film with spooky, foggy, Halloween-esque vibes. And this film also encompasses that, in my opinion. There are just scenes that are so aesthetically spooky and beautiful that look even more beautiful with all of the lights off. Like the scene with the Wolfman roaming through the foggy forest. Love it! Love it! And in at number 2, we have Nosferatu, 1922. Let's be honest, all silent horror films are best watched when in a dark room with a big bowl of popcorn. Especially Nosferatu, with its creepy atmosphere and imagery, it just makes for the perfect spooky movie to watch in the dark, especially if you sync it up with the Misfits. But that's just me. Now, before we get into our number 1 pick for best horror films to watch in the dark, here are some honorable mentions that I thought of. The Exorcist, 1973, for obvious reasons. Skinamarink, 2023, mainly because of its atmosphere and horrifying imagery. Yes, I know not many people like that one, but it kind of creeped me out. It's especially creepy watching it in the dark, which I recommend. And House on Haunted Hill, 1959, because of a few of its little subtle jump scares and overall spooky atmosphere. Now for number 1, we have my personal favorite, and one that I actually saw for the first time during a thunderstorm, one that is actually the very first horror film that I ever watched. And that is Night of the Living Dead, 1968. This one is number 1 because of so many different reasons. For one, its black and white creepiness looks fantastic in the dark. 2, it has the atmosphere of your typical horror film that you'd huddle up in blankets and watch in the dark during a thunderstorm. Kind of like I did. Number 3, it just looks gorgeous in the dark. Oh my god, I love it. I love watching this film at any time, but any chance I have to watch it in the dark, I take it. It is just so beautiful in the dark, such a beautiful film. Well, that just about concludes today's video, creeps. If you haven't seen any of these films, I highly recommend them, but I especially recommend them in the dark. Be sure to give me a like and subscribe. Hit the little bell notification so you never miss any spooky content. Be sure to follow me on all platforms, that's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at PurgatoriHorror. I'm not on Facebook, so you won't find me there. I also have a Patreon page, so if you're looking for other ways to support my work and channel, I'll put the link to that in the description below. Be sure to check out what I have to offer, and I'm always switching things up. I also want to say thank you to all of my current patrons from the bottom of my heart. I am so thankful and so grateful for your support. Thank you. Anyways, thank you guys so much. I love you, so long, and pleasant screams.